My name is John Weir. I'm a member of the St. Joseph's Parish Refugee Outreach Committee. Today, the Church asks us to celebrate the World Day of People in Refugee and Migrant situations. In this week's liturgy, we have brought to light ancient texts, heard life breathed into their words, and now we reflect on what there is to celebrate. In the first reading, Ezekiel, speaking about personal responsibility, finds himself and other Judeans forcibly displaced in exile in Babylon. The city of Jerusalem and its temple lie in ruins. Today, the United Nations Human Rights Commission reports similar descriptions of forced displacements affecting 80 million people, our global neighbors, escaping violence, conflict, and persecution. 2 weeks ago, under the headlines behind me, refugees demand release from scourged Greek camp. The Globe and Mail quoted Freddie Musamba from Gambia, one of our 80 million global neighbors seeking refuge, who found himself on the Greek island of Lesbos in an overcrowded refugee camp, which had just been entirely destroyed by fire. Freddie says, "We have spent days here without eating, without drinking. We are like abandoned children. We have endured things we didn't know could happen." Words that echo experiences through the millennia, from Ezekiel to Mr. Musamba. There's nothing to celebrate here. The responsorial psalm expresses a hope in God all day long. The United Nations Human Rights Commission poster behind me expresses an unquenchable hope. Is hope enough to celebrate? In the second reading from Paul to the Philippians, Paul invites the Philippians to become servants, pursuing not selfish interests, but the interests of others. In a sponsorship guidebook used by the Refugee Outreach Committee, we are asked to empower, support, and equip people we work with to make their own decisions. The words of the charism of the Oblates of Mary Immaculate also come to mind, calling for service, bringing a message of liberating joy to the most abandoned, those whose situations cry out for justice. There are words to celebrate here. In today's Gospel from Matthew, the marginalized status of tax collectors is raised. During this first century, tax collectors were unwelcomed in the synagogues. Preceding today's reading, Matthew describes Jesus' surprising, brief, and unconditional request to a tax collector. As Jesus passed by, he saw a man called Matthew sitting at the tax office, and Jesus said to him, "Follow me." And Matthew rose and followed him. Perhaps Jesus did not see a tax collector. Perhaps he saw a person abandoned and marginalized in his society. He offered him a relationship, and the tax collector invited him to dinner. There's the beginning of a relationship to celebrate here. To these ancient and recent texts, I would like to add a story of our Refugee Outreach Committee experience. Before telling this recent story, here's a little background about our committee. We have an administrative team of 7 who meet monthly, and an 8-member settlement support team who help with many hands-on tasks as needed. We appreciate and work closely with our St. Joseph's Parish leadership team and are grateful for you, our parishioners and friends, who support us with your time, talent, and treasure. The characters, Anna, Mabel, and George, in my story, are fictional. However, the incidents woven into the story have happened to the people we work with. Several years ago, Anna, one of the 80 million seeking refuge, came to our church door for Sunday liturgy. She was welcomed by Mabel, a member of the welcoming team. Anna explained she had come to Canada with a student visa, knowing no one, intending to seek permanent residency due to the violent political situation in her home country. Forced to withdraw from her studies because of inadequate English skills and a lack of financial resources, her student visa had expired, and she now risked deportation. She was also plagued with toothaches and gum infections, which left her in pain with many sleepless nights. With limited opportunities, she had found a live-in housekeeping job with a family who paid meager wages, threatened to report her if she did not comply, and forced her to work 14-hour days, allowing her out only for a few hours on Sundays. Over several months, Anna continued to attend Sunday liturgy, and Mabel was able to get food for her from the supper table, legal advice through the Women's Center, and an interview with members of the Refugee Outreach Committee. After a few months, the Refugee Outreach Committee found new permanent accommodation for her, located donated furnishings, helped her to move, and provided her with money for living expenses, some as a gift and some as an interest-free pay-when-you-are-able loan. She had heard about a food services training program offered at the mission. She wanted to apply, but was extremely reluctant given her financial situation and recent disappointment as a student. Mabel encouraged her, and George, a member of the Refugee Outreach Committee, accompanied her to an interview at the mission, where Chef Rick Watson met and welcomed them. He spoke about the program and asked if there were any questions. Anna, searching for English words, hesitantly and softly told Rick about herself and asked a question about prerequisites. Chef Rick answered briefly and surprisingly, "No prerequisites required. Your past is your past. No tuition either. Together we will make it work. All we ask is that you show up daily and on time." Anna, smiling and relieved, enrolled and graduated 6 months later. Our story does not end here. Funds were raised for ongoing dental treatment, and we continue to walk with Anna. There's a new beginning to celebrate here. We have just heard texts spanning approximately 2,500 years and been challenged to reflect on what there is to celebrate on this World Day of 80 million people in refugee and migrant situations. If words remain words and 80 million remain seeking refuge, then hope is unquenchable. However, when life is breathed into words, whether ancient or recent, and people are inspired to create communities and opportunities which include rather than exclude, our words become flesh and people are empowered. A cry for justice, an unquenchable hope is satisfied, and we do have much to celebrate. Thank you for listening.